It's a real honour for me to be here tonight to be able to share with you all the T2 story and how we've taken this wonderfully iconic Australian brand that was born in Melbourne and introduced it to international citizens. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story, but I thought I would actually start with a little anecdote, a little experience I had maybe 18 months ago. I spent a lot of time travelling as we've tried to build this brand, and this little moment that I experienced for me almost summed up the challenge that we had when we took T2, 22 years of history in Australia, into new markets. You know when you go through customs and you're asked to fill in one of those passes and you have to put on it, you know, your name and your passport details, and then it says occupation. And so I'd written CEO of T2. And I walked through and the gentleman at the counter was studying my details and he said to me, "What's your occupation?" I said, "Oh, I'm the CEO of T2. And he looked down, he looked back up. He said, "No, seriously, what's your occupation?" I'm seriously the CEO of T2. And he was like, "Right, really, like you're not making this up?" And I said, "I'm really not making it up, that's what I do." And the next thing I know, he went, hey, Jim, Karen, this is our boss, she's the boss of Terminal 2. So, you take for granted that people are going to know your brand. You've got such a rich history. And then all of a sudden you have to, in many ways, unlearn everything you've learnt and represent it in new markets. So what I'm going to do tonight is tell you a little bit of that story. A little bit of history on T2, if you'll indulge me for a moment. So it was born 22 years ago in Brunswick Street, Fitzroy. This is a picture of our very, very first store. And Marianne Shearer, who is our founder, a visionary woman, had this absolute passion to introduce Australians to a world of tea beyond the black and milk and sugar that they'd been drinking, and to expose them to kind of a world of tea discovery unlike no other. But she didn't have trends in her favour. This was a time when the coffee culture was exploding in Melbourne. So it was all about macchiatos and lattes and cappuccinos, and tea was something your grandmother gave you when you were sick. So over that time though, in a hell of a lot of, you know, persistence on her part and a lot of creativity, she's been able to create a wonderful brand pretty much built on the fact that she infused tea with a youthfulness and an exuberance that had never been presented before. So just for a tick, does everyone know T2? Yes. Has everyone been into a store? Yes. Okay, well just to get you in the mood so that you sort of know the canvas that we had to play with, our start point as we took it global, I'm just going to invite you into our world of tea and show you this little video.
Hi, welcome to T2. Come in and explore our world of tea. This is our smell table. Here we have over 200 teas and tisanes for you to touch and smell. We're always serving up hot and cold teas for you to taste. You'll find everything from our newest blends to our all-time favourite brews. This is our tea library. Here you'll find teas from all around the world, from black to oolong, green to white. There's a flavour here to suit everyone. We love to share the best ways to brew the perfect cup. Our favourite would have to be the T2 tea maker. It makes brewing easy. Too easy. Our customers love our teawares. We have everything a tea lover would need, from the traditional cast iron teapots to a more contemporary style. We're famous for always sharing tea with our customers. We give them samples and complimentary gift wrapping too. Thanks for visiting, and we hope to see you again soon.
Okay, our mission actually at T2 is pretty simple. We want to create a T2 generation on every continent. And that's basically our community of advocates that are really bound by their love of tea, but done differently. Because we respect the history of tea, we love the rituals of tea, we absolutely adore that every single country that you go to has its own version of tea, and that is a sign of hospitality and connection. That's something so beautiful. And yet we like to turn all of that on its head and kind of break some of the rules and represent it in a way that's different. And we like to do that with a really creative and disruptive force. So what we've done over the last 3 years is really try to take that mission and realise it. And in order to do that well, we decided it was time to take the brand global. So just a snapshot. We've sort of doubled the T2 business, but we've done it by moving it from an Australian brand only into international markets, taking it from a retail store only business and into much more diversified channels, from being not having a lot of data and insight, a lot of intuition, which served the company incredibly well in Australia, but to being much more data enabled. And probably the most important one is from having one founder to having a company of many founders that have been able to help us take the business global. So today I thought what I would do is I'm going to talk you through sort of 3 different sections. This is our journey. It's been rich with amazing highs and really big challenges as we've sort of built the plane while we've been flying it. So we're learning as we go. And there's been 3 things that we've sort of had to get right. The first one was all around our passion and how we reinterpret that on a global scale, market by market. And we've sort of called that tea done differently. How do we take what is our DNA but make it fit for purpose for the customers that we serve country by country? The second area was around our business model. So what we did know for sure is that what got us here probably wouldn't get us to our destination. So we had to rethink the way we were doing business to be successful. And then the last area that I'll come on to talk about is really about our people. And this was all around the mindset and the culture to enable us to take up the opportunity, but also the challenge and the ambiguity that comes with taking a brand with rich history into a new market. So I'm going to take you through some of the lessons learnt along the way. Let's start with tea done differently. So we had a couple of things that were going in our favour. So why did we decide to go global when we did 3 years ago? There are a couple of things, but the first one was macroeconomic trends were absolutely in our favour. So there was some natural momentum there. People were looking for wellness, but wellness that was really matched with indulgence and really highly sensorial, immersive experiences. We had customers that were looking for brands that were lifestyle brands and really representative of what we've called fluid lives, the fact that they're on the go, in the office, at home, out and about. And at the heart of it, they're looking for experiences. And of course, they want those brands to be authentic, pure, natural, traceable. And we felt that actually, yep, we've got a category and a brand proposition that allows us to tap into these trends. The second thing that we had going in our favour was around the fact that we had a brand that had a high level of saliency with millennials. You know, they're the biggest single generation that has ever lived across the world, bigger than, you know, Gen X and Y, etc. And these people really are looking for brands that are a bit of a mashup, that are very immersive, very experiential, and at the heart of it are offering not just a product that you buy, but a brand idea that you can buy into and sort of opt in to be part of a lifestyle. So we felt trends and the millennial target was in our favour. So then we thought our sweet spot really then became tapping into wellness that entices the senses, and the way we were going to do it, irrespective of the market that we were in, was through experimentation and exploration. So that made us feel pretty good. We kind of had a strategic intent, and the world was our oyster. And a lot of people have said to me, well, how do you know where to start, where to go first? And I thought there are 3 simple things that we did, and this is going to really simplify it, but it actually wasn't much more complicated than this. We picked 20 countries that we thought would have the most transference, let's say with Australia, and would probably have a high level of resonance with a brand like T2. We then did a bit of a market attractiveness assessment, so things like, GDP, population, affluence, etc. And we married that with, let's say, ease of entry. Things like the regulatory environment, the legal environment, the competitive intensity, so the right to win, let's say. That was the first thing we did. And from that, we were able to rank those 20 markets. Second thing we did was overlay it with the e-commerce landscape, because that is so profoundly changing how you might choose where to send your brand or present your brand, and that did change the rankings a bit for us. And then the last thing we did was recognise that people have very different experiences in different parts of the day, in different occasions, and wear very many different hats. So we did a bit of a shopper journey. Let's imagine a simplified version of a day in the life of, to help understand partners that we could partner with, department stores, travel, retail environments, where actually we could reach more customers. And from that, we made some choices. So we went into the UK, we're in the US, we're in Singapore as our gateway to Asia, and we most recently went into China, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And we were in Australia and New Zealand. So we now just have about 100 stores around the world. Our DNA, from when this brand was created way back to now, is the same, in that we want to be tea reimagined. Constantly reimagining the world of tea for our customers. But what we needed to get right market by market, and we learnt this in some ways the hard way because we got it wrong and we had to course correct, and in other ways we got it really right and we reaped the benefits much more quickly. And this was about nuancing the brand market by market. And I thought the best way just to illustrate this is to show you some videos of what we did when we went into the different countries and how we were true to the brand, but we repositioned it. Now, these are just some examples of some digital content, so it doesn't represent the full campaign, but it'll give you a feel for the insights that we tapped into. So the first one was obviously in Australia, with the history that we have, our biggest opportunity was that people know T2. They actually love T2. It's the brand with the highest amount of equity in the Australian market for tea, which is amazing thanks to the fans that we have. But actually people weren't having it that often. It was a bit more of a treat. So what we wanted to do was drive frequency and be really part of people's lives. So this was the part of the content that we ran in Australia, and then I'll show you how that changed market by market. That's Australia. UK. Now the Brits will tell you they know tea. They drink 8 to 10 cups of tea a day. So going into the UK and saying, hey, we're experts in tea, ain't gonna happen with any great degree of success. So we knew that we wouldn't be able to change their morning cuppa, their builder's brew that they get up and start the day with. But what we did know was an incredibly important trigger for British consumers was this increasing wellness, emerging wellness, and they knew that tea could play a role in that, and they really wanted to be exposed to a world of tea, so repertoire was really interesting to them. So we chose to focus on health and key occasions, and this is one of the examples of content for the UK. Then we went to the US, and we entered the American market via New York. So we probably picked the toughest city in the world. But ignorance was bliss at the time because we were just like, yay, we're going to New York. We're going to build our brand there. But for those of you that are familiar with the American market, it's a coffee market. It's all about coffee, coffee, coffee. And when you do have tea, it's iced, it's very sweet, and it's quite flavoured, and it's usually in the south. So we had a different job to be done there. But again, what we learnt was a real trigger was that Americans they almost saw tea in its newest form that they were being presented almost like wine. They wanted to be really educated on the world of tea because that gave them a sort of amount of expertise and cachet, particularly amongst this millennial target that we were going after. So we chose to be all about our tour guide in many ways to your world of tea. This is what we ran in the US.
crazy fruity. It's like all the best fruit flavours squished into one seriously tasty fruit tea. It's like the ultimate fruit salad. Dragon fruit, goji berries, papaya, kiwi and blueberries all smashed together to make this wildly addictive fruity iced tea. The name really does sum it up. Fruitalicious. It's delicious.
And finally, we get to Singapore. Now, what I love about Singapore, has anyone been to Singapore before? Yeah, okay, lots of people. Okay, so it's like this ultimate melting pot of cultures, and you've got the influence from China with the beautiful oolongs and the green tea. You've got the chas, the sort of really milky chai tea from India, and then of course you've got the colonial influence. So actually, Singaporeans know tea. They understand the benefits of tea, but what we found they really want to know about was help me understand how I can have tea differently, how I can brew it in different ways. So we focused our energies on innovation. What are the innovative ways of brewing tea and experiencing it on the go? And this again is just one example. So it gives you a little bit of a flavour of how we took the brand into markets by nuancing it for local customers. The next thing I want to talk about is business done differently, because this was probably where we really had to rethink what we were doing. And there's this fabulous phrase around having a beginner's mindset. You know, beginners tend to find multiple solutions to problems, whereas experts sometimes only see one. We really had to rethink the business in order to be successful. So 4 key areas that I want to talk about here, and I'll go through these quite quickly, but they were very materially important to how we were able to go global. The first one was, I kind of described T2 like a swan, because hopefully when you experience in the store, everything looks lovely and calm and organised and like it's well thought through, and then back at the office, it's crazy. It's like, you know, the swan flapping around the surface of the water. And what we found is that we had all this ambition to go global, but actually if you want to go global, you need to be very data enabled and very IT ready. And so we had to spend a lot of time getting our IT systems up and running and our data right. And that was about collecting the data, centralising the data, customising that data and knowing what was valuable, and then also working out, well, how are we going to commercialise it so that it actually is valuable. But that piece of creating an ecosystem so that you are fit for purpose for global is still a work in progress for us. But what it enabled us to do was become omni-channel, and there was a lot of emotion in that for the T2 business, because this had been a brand that had its heart and soul in retail bricks and mortar that we owned. But actually, if we wanted to be very customer centric, then we needed to be where customers were. And that data platform and that IT platform allowed us to create our e-commerce store. It's now our biggest store for us, and it serves 90 different countries. And it also allowed us to create great partnerships with other players. We now have about 5,000 wholesale partners around the world. It also allowed us to go into China, and we kind of threw our entire repeatable model up in the air and went, it's no longer repeatable, we're going to go into China actually with an e-commerce first strategy. And we did that in the back end of last year, and we may well open stores at some point, but we are really having to think differently about how we take advantage of the amazing e-commerce landscape in China, and I'm happy to take any questions on that later. The third area was around really sort of smart marketing, and we were absolutely happy to invest ahead of the curve as we'd made the decision to go into these new markets, but not so much that it wasn't commercially responsible. So the two things I'd probably call out here, and for the marketeers in the room, or actually even just for business leaders in the room, we didn't have a lot of budget, but we wanted to use the budget that we had really smartly. So we did two key things. We really tapped into sort of shared economy. We created an influencer panel with about 300 or more influencers now, but they have a combined reach of about 30 million people. It allowed us to use all of the energy and passion that they had for T2 to then talk to their networks in a way that we would never have been able to do with that degree of scale without them. And the second thing that has been really important to us is our loyalty program, our Tea Society. We have about 1.1 million members in that group, and they're amazing advocates for the brand, but also we've been able to tap into them around our innovation moving forward, our communication, bits about the brand that we're looking to evolve, like our sustainability piece. And so they've become not only an incredible source of loyalty for the brand, but insight for the brand. And I think that's something that any business can do easily, but it all comes down to how you use then the information you have. The last area is just an innovation ethos right through our value chain. And we all know that the retail landscape is kind of tough right now, but you can either go it's tough, or you can go it's tough, but those brands that are really good are going to rise to the surface. And I want to be one of those brands that remains, you know, there. So we're looking at different formats as we've gone into markets like the Middle East, where we're looking at right now. They're really keen on an F&B concept or high degrees of personalisation and customisation. So we're having to innovate our own model. Partnerships have become really important to us. If you can collaborate as you go into a new market with people that already have strong equity on the ground, they end up being an amazing third-party endorsement for your brand. And again, you can reach customers in a way you couldn't do yourself. And if you remember the story at the beginning, brand awareness and what we stood for was a really important thing for us to achieve. And the last area, and probably the most exciting but the most challenging for us, is how we really bring purpose into everything that we do every day. So re-engineering our supply chain so that we're much more sustainable than we've ever been, and we've made some great progress on that part. And then having really great impact in the community. We've had some excellent fortune and success in going global, and we would never have done that without the upstream support of the tea pickers, frankly, who they pick tirelessly every day, and can we give back to them? That's an important part of our strategy moving forward. Some of you may have seen the Ajiri tea that we have in our stores. It comes from Kenya. The tea comes from the plantation, but then the women that live there have a social enterprise where they handcraft the packaging, so it's all very bespoke, and then we sell that in our store and it goes back to those communities. And the more that we can do that upstream in our value chain, but also right in the communities that we serve through our stores day in, day out, the more we'll invest there. The last area I want to talk about is thinking done differently, and I've left it till last because I actually think it is the most important thing for any business in this time of absolute hyper-fragmentation, complexity, ambiguity, is just making sure that you have the right people and the right mindset in the business to be able to make it happen. And fundamental for our business was moving it from being an Australian brand that had some interest in going global to being a really proud global brand with rich Australian roots. And it sounds like a small difference, but actually it's quite a big one when you think about how you then set up your organisation, or how you bring capability into the business, how you allocate resources. And so we spent a lot of time really just getting that mindset right in the business. And key to that, and I mentioned it at the beginning of this presentation, was we had the benefit of an amazing visionary founder in Marianne, but when you're running 20 stores in just Australia, you can afford to have one person that's really steering the ship at all levels. But as you go global, that empowerment and that generosity of sharing your knowledge and capability into the markets, into the channels, becomes really important. So we're really trying to build that founder's mindset and that entrepreneurial spirit right through the organisation, and empowering as much as we can, as close to the customers, because we're building a global brand, but we serve local customers, and making sure that we never lose sight of that is really, really important. This is, I don't know if you can see the words on this, but values drive us. They drive most people. But when things get really tough, and sometimes they do, we've had to really dig deep and go back to our entrepreneurial roots, but also the values. You know, the curiosity of what's happening in the market and what matters to people today. Generosity, not only for our customers, but in the knowledge that we share internally. Passion, creativity, finding lateral solutions to the problems as they come up, because they will come up often. How do we, harness all of the creativity that we have in the business to really use that to do amazing things? And probably the most important one is courage. It's kind of dream big, feel the fear, and kind of do it anyway. And that's something that has been key, making sure that there are people in the business that are comfortable with that ambiguity and that complexity, but massively excited and inspired by the task at hand. So I guess in summary, you know, our brand T2 is about tea reimagined, but probably the journey that we've been on over the last 3 years, and absolutely most certainly for where we're moving to, we've had to reimagine everything in our business. Reimagine the way we take the brand into new markets and present it in a way that makes sense. Reimagine our business model and be okay to walk away from the stuff that we thought was so important to us and be okay to try something different. And then reimagine the culture so that we take the very best from the past. We don't want to lose that, but we don't let that also drive the future. And so at T2, we believe if it can be imagined, it can be done. And it can be done if we do it together. So, guys, thank you so much. It's been lovely to share the story with you.